A sham going on today on Capitol Hill. You got a few left-wing professors who are saying the president should be impeached. We'll get into that. Plus, Adam Schiff got phone records that include some contact with Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, and yes, that's right, John Solomon, a journalist. Talking about that, plus how Iran is in the midst of tumult. What does that tell us about Trump versus Obama on foreign policy? That and more coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. An honor and a privilege to have you here with me today. And yes, in fact, Bon Jovi is down the hall. So Brandon and I right now are living on a prayer. I will say, Bon Jovi, he still looks good, but I think he's like 105 years old now.
Full head of hair.
Full head of hair. I respect the hair game on Mr. Jovi.
He looks like maybe you in 30 years.
Well, indeed, sir. Well played. Give this man a raise. All right, let's get right into it today, folks. You have the most, it's different emotions that keep coming up for me with this nonsense going on in Capitol Hill. So let's just do a quick review of where we are. Remember, you have the fate of the leader of the free world at stake here. And this whole thing is a clown show. I mean, this is absurd. It's ridiculous. That's one set of emotions. And then on the other side, I have, my God, the Democrats have completely lost their minds. The media is dishonest, is to be distrusted. And wow, what we are seeing today certainly goes right to the heart of all of that. It is stunning. It is astonishing. Here's what's going on. By way of quick review, the Democrats launched their series of impeachment hearings last month, and we've been forced to sit through all of this series of State Department bureaucrats who have come forward. I mean, because if there's one thing that's finally going to convince Rust Belt voters and independents in purple states to turn against Trump, it's having some pompous tenured professor from Harvard Law School give America a boring lecture on the constitutional origins of Orange Man Bad. That's what Democrats have switched to now. We went from State Department bureaucrats to law professors. There were four. I watched the testimony this morning. I do this so you don't have to. Don't worry. It's one of my jobs here. Three of the four are rabid Democrat partisans. I mean, just could not be any more frothy-mouthed libs, so to speak. I mean, they hate Trump. Oh, they hate Trump. This is completely unsurprising. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody watching this. And I think today is also a good reminder as we have these law professors on Capitol Hill telling us why the President of the United States should be impeached and removed from office. Let's make sure we're clear on that. This is not just a question of whether there should be an impeachment vote to show that Trump has erred. Those who are advocating for impeachment do so with the clear understanding that the next step is supposed to be removal from office by the Senate. They want to undo the results of the 2016 election. So as we have these law professors up there on Capitol Hill, today is a good reminder for all Americans that law schools now overwhelmingly reflect the absurd left-wing dominance that you see in undergraduate institutions, colleges and universities across the country. And in fact, professors at Harvard Law School usually have the same politics as gender studies and diversity assistant teaching professors at Woke U, the University of Wokeness or Wokistan or whatever. Oh my. That's what you're seeing today. These professors, with the exception of Professor Turley, who the Democrats don't want to talk to at all, and I'll get into Turley's argument here. And I also want to tell you something because I'm receiving a lot of feedback from you. I am sensitive to the fact that there's more going on in the world. There's more for us to talk about than just impeachment. So every day I'm going to make a real effort, including doing deep dives in subject matter that I think is important, that goes to not just the 2020 election and the political conversation in this country, but that is just of interest, is worthwhile for us to dive into. apart from this impeachment cycle, impeachment every day. I mean, we have to do some of that because we have to also not just understand what's going on, because this is the primary political story in this country. We also have to push back against the other side. We can't leave the propaganda entirely unanswered. There will be people out there who, especially if we just tire of the defense of reason, sanity, rule of law, constitutionality, rationality, decency, godliness, all of these things, if we abandon the front lines of that, then people will be, some poor souls will be dragged over to the side of the left and believe all of this nonsense, believe all of this absurdity. Which reminds me, my favorite part of the Democrats' impeachment theater is when these petty demagogues pretend they really don't want this. It just pains them to impeach Trump. It makes them so sorrowful and prayerful, in fact, for the nation. Only a moron believes this, my friends, and only a fraud would say it. But here we are. Pelosi, Schiff, Nadler, they all go through the motions. Oh, it's a solemn day for the country. We really don't want to have to impeach this man. These people are flatly, clearly, blatantly absurd and dishonest in all of this. They are power hungry and power mad. And remember, they feel affronted by the President of the United States personally. They do take this quite personally. They think that this president is an insult to their very existence. And so it's more even than just making sure that they regain power. There's also the repudiation of everything that is Trump. They insist on that. They need that. They don't just want victory. They want victory, and then they want to salt the earth afterwards and tear down every structure and make sure that there's nothing left of Trumpism. But here is the big problem that they face for those of us who are trying to be honest and serious about this. They keep changing what it is they're telling us is so terrible that has occurred, and that's because it's not working. They change tactics and strategy every day because trying to convince the American people that the president did something terrible isn't working. There are about 40% or 45% of Americans who will believe anything about this president because all they care about is how much they have been trained, like a bunch of SEALs, to hate this president. You know, everybody has to hate this president. Everybody has to sort of clap together and, pass the beach ball on the nose from one to another like the SEALs. They have to, those kinds of SEALs, not the elite commandos. I mean, I think that was clear, but just to be, so there's no, just so Media Matters can't pull that out. Oh, is he mocking our warriors? No, I meant the aquamarine mammals with shiny coats of fur and blubber, which I can tell you is probably very handy in this time of year for any mammal. All right, back to why their story, sorry, it was a buck diversion. Back to why their story doesn't hold up here, why the Democrats are in trouble. Professor Jonathan Turley, whom I've interviewed many times, I will say a very, very gentlemanly fellow and a scholar. I mean, and by the way, a Democrat. He is a Democrat. He did not vote for Trump, but he's not an absurd leftist. I do believe we have to remember that exists. Not all Democrats are lunatics. Lunatics run the Democratic Party now, unfortunately. They've taken over. I mean, the inmates in the Democratic Party do run the asylum, but there are still Democrats that you can have reasonable conversations with that will agree on some matters and disagree on others, but can also, and this is the key, you can see eye to eye with them on a basic framework of what is true and what is not, what is real and what is not, what is fair and what is not, which has now been, with these Democrats and the sham preceding this, has been completely abandoned. No serious person thinks that that's what's really going on here. This is all meant to destroy the President of the United States. Here's what Turley points out, for example, in an editorial in The Hill. I used to be a Hill employee, launched Hill TV, in fact. So, NBD. Got that going for me, which is nice. Quote, hold on, before I get to this quote. They're saying that, and this is a common refrain, that which Schiff, I'm not just saying general people, this is beyond anything Nixon did. That is a line from Adam Schiff's. Yesterday he gave this sort of summation, this I'm Adam Schiff, and I'm giving my grandiose closing argument about how you should get rid of the President of the United States. I mean, he doesn't sound that cool. That sounded way better than what Schiff sounds like, but you know what I mean. A pompous jerk giving his speech about why the president should be gone. But this is beyond. We've gone from this is Trump's Watergate to this is worse than Watergate, and back and forth many, many times. But now we're in the this is worse than Watergate. I mean, does anyone really believe this? Does anyone take this seriously? I think people do believe it, which is troubling, which is a bad sign for their judgment, their ability to decipher basic facts and understand the world around them. But this is beyond anything Nixon did, is what Schiff says. Let's just take a little moment. Remember, Nixon was not, in fact, impeached and removed from office. He resigned. This is what one of the professors who's on Capitol Hill, one of the four, the only sane one, the others are crazy. They're leftists. I mean, maybe they know what they're doing is absurd and they're just doing it for a purpose. But here's what he writes of the Nixon impeachment. The Nixon impeachment, quote, began with a felony crime with the Watergate burglary, then swept to encompass an array of other crimes involving political slush funds, payments of hush money, maintenance of an enemies list, directing tax audits of critics, witness intimidation, multiple instances of perjury, and even an alleged kidnapping. In the end, there were nearly 70 officials charged and 24 of them found guilty. And Nixon was named as an unindicted conspirator by a grand jury. End quote. Adam Schiff, the point man, handpicked by Nancy Pelosi, the point man for this entire impeachment effort, is looking at you, the American people, and trying to keep a straight face. Although I think Adam Schiff doesn't really do much in the way of facial expressions, but he's staring at you and telling you that all that Nixon stuff, what Trump has done, is worse than that. What honest, reasonable person could take that statement seriously? I sit here and I tell you that Trump has committed no crime, zero, with this Ukraine debacle mess. Oh, and by the way, no crime, zero, with the Mueller report. No crime, zero, with the Stormy Daniels payoff thing that they were obsessed. I mean, yeah, just go down the whole list. The emoluments clause, all of this, no crime, no crime, no crime. And they say that this is worse? How is it worse? They keep making accusations and allegations that are false. Against Nixon, at least a lot of the stuff was true. And this is worse than that? These people are trying to throw your sense of reality into disarray. They're trying to just engage in such a fierce campaign of propaganda that you no longer understand what is true and what is not, and you just do what you're told because that's what the good people do. They are absurd, but unfortunately they are also dangerous. What they are doing to the country right now is troubling, and it goes beyond your usual political back and forth. They are kicking at the load-bearing walls of this republic, and they do so with self-righteous smiles. This is not a good place for the country to be in. I do think that Trump is winning this impeachment battle so far, but this impeachment battle actually is about a lot more than Donald Trump.
This is not about Ukraine. This is about our democracy. This is about our national security. This is about whether the American people have a right to expect that the President of the United States is going to act in their interests, with their security in mind, and not for some illicit personal or political reason. So Americans should care deeply about whether the President of the United States is betraying their trust in him, betraying that oath that he took to the Constitution to protect our country and defend its institutions.
There you go. That's classic Adam Schiff in his little closing argument. Shifty Schiff. What is he even saying? Betraying our institutions, betraying our national security. But just how? By doing what? When they say things like demanding dirt on a political rival, or when they say things like interfering in our election, that is a lie. The president did not demand interference in the election. The president mentioned getting an answer about corruption in Ukraine, which is a legitimate foreign policy interest. If what he did is so bad, why do they have to lie about it? He did not say, give me dirt on Joe Biden. He said, if you can get some answers about this Burisma situation, Hunter Biden, let me know. I've heard bad things. The president's allowed to say that. Is it tough politics? Yes. Do we want the president not to engage in tough politics? Do we want the president to back down from this? Because let's understand, the Democrats are used to operating in a world where Democrats don't get investigated. And if they do get investigated because what they do is egregiously criminal, like Hillary Clinton, then do you know what they do? They make sure that the system is rigged, so there is no accountability, there is no justice, there is no punishment. That's what they do. So now all of a sudden Trump comes along and says, no, Hunter and Joe Biden don't have special immunity. There is plenty of reason. The same people, let's remember this, friends, who tell you that there was reason to investigate a presidential campaign, not somebody who maybe was going to be running for president in the future, an active presidential campaign, one of two people vying for the presidency, based on what someone said to someone in a bar, that someone being George Papadopoulos. Those same people now tell you that the son of the person who is in charge of foreign policy in a country under the Obama administration, getting $50,000 to $75,000 or $85,000 a month to be on the board of some company when the guy's an imbecile and a derelict clown. There's no basis to look into whether there's any corruption going on there. There's certainly the appearance of corruption, and when there's the appearance of corruption, there can be an investigation of the same. These people constantly change the rules. They have no principles. They have no standards. They have a relentless pursuit for power. Don't make any mistake about that. They will do whatever they have to do in order to get the outcome that they desire. They profess that the other side is tearing down institutions while they're gathering the dynamite themselves and putting the foundations of those same institutions. They just don't care. This is the instinct of the totalitarian. Whatever they need to do to get what they want is inherently justified because what they want is good and the people who oppose it are bad. This was the same mentality of the Bolsheviks and, by the way, the Mensheviks, leading into the Russian Revolution and then the Soviet Union. This is the same mentality you've seen with Pol Pot, the same mentality you see today in North Korea. Anything that the ruling regime wants must inherently be good, therefore any opposition to it is bad. And whatever rules you have to change, whatever injustices you have to abide or encourage or inflict, those are all also inherently just fine because you are achieving a righteous ends through your much less than righteous means. That's where we are right now in this country. Adam Schiff and the Democrats are an abject disgrace, and yet they cling to this notion that they're the good guys.
President Trump's conduct, as described in the testimony and evidence, clearly constitutes impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors under the Constitution. In particular, the memorandum and other testimony relating to the July 25th, 2019 phone call between the two presidents, President Trump and President Zelensky, more than sufficiently indicates that President Trump abused his office by soliciting the president of Ukraine to investigate his political rivals in order to gain personal political advantage, including in relation to the 2020 election.
Oh, Professor Feldman, you're doing such a fantastic job auditioning for MSNBC. Or perhaps CNN. There might be a bidding war for your services after this. Absurd. Like I said, just go to Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School's Twitter feed, and you will see the grandiose idiocy that is often rewarded at the most elite institutions in this country. The elite institutions, we've found more and more, exist specifically to prop up many people who don't deserve it in the least. And the second you begin to challenge that, they get very irascible. They don't much appreciate the truth being exposed, whether it's elite journalism, elite academia, go through the ranks of all of it. Frauds aplenty. Good people, of course. And some, I assume, are good people, but mostly frauds. That was Professor Noah Feldman. Notice how we have all these statements, all this conjecture, all this analysis. It certainly constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors that this guy thinks that what the president said is an abuse of power based upon the supposition, based upon the assumption that there was going to be a follow-on of pressure to get Zelensky to present information that was not true in order to harm a political rival here in the United States. I have a point of, not a point of order. That would be like, can I have a bathroom break? But I have a point of discussion. And I like the parliamentary procedure stuff where they all bang the gavels in Congress. They're like, hear ye, hear ye. It's time for lunch. You know, they do that parliamentary stuff. I have one of, what if, just stay with me here for a second. What if there was, in fact, a corrupt arrangement involving the Bidens? People who tell me that this is settled are running cover. We don't know. How would we know? How would President Trump know unless he asked and got a sense of the investigation? Keep in mind, when you ask a foreign government about possible corruption involving that foreign government, when it's one of the most corrupt countries in the world, guess what? Maybe you have to push a little bit. Maybe the first answer you get is not factually accurate. Oh, good heavens, who could think of such a thing? Maybe you have to dig. Maybe you have to exert some pressure. Use some of your connections and influence to get answers. Everything that the left tells us is premised here upon many things, but one of them is that clearly Hunter and Joe Biden did no wrong here. We saw this with Anderson Cooper at the debates. You know, these frauds at CNN. Frauds. Tapper and Cooper and Lemon and Cuomo. Bro Cuomo. I'll wreck your bleep. Cuomo. That guy. A.k.a. Fredo, a.k.a. Bro Cuomo. Frauds. But Cooper, just to show us that, you know, he's playing for Team Biden as much as he can right now, said, you know, there's no evidence and it is not true, however he phrased the question, that there was anything wrong going on in Ukraine. Well, CNN done a lot of investigating about that one? I don't think so. Also, why can't we ask questions here? We had a number of people at the top level of the United States government, based on the flimsiest of evidence, using FISA procedures to go after the Trump campaign. And now we're told that there can be no investigation of anything involving Democrat Joe Biden. There was investigation of lots of stuff involving President Trump when he was running. Why is that okay, but the Biden investigation is not? I mean, I fight this battle on a different level than many of my, oh, no, but can we prove the quid pro quo? No. Excuse me. There's no immunity for Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. There is nothing wrong. I don't care that there is a peripheral or secondary political benefit. There is, in fact, nothing wrong with saying, can you get answers for me on whether there was corruption here? Can you look into this? Yeah, the answer is yeah, you can look into this. Now, people have asked me this. What would make me change my mind? What would make me change my mind on this is if Trump had said, oh, really, there's nothing on Biden? Make something up or else you're not getting the money. Now we have a problem. Now we have abuse of power. Now we have a president. But that's not what happened at all. And no one even suggests that's what happened. The mere request to get answers about the Bidens. The Bidens, you see, because he's the Democrat frontrunner, which is a complete absurd, should be slap in the face to how stupid the Democratic Party's become. But anyway, because he's the Democrat frontrunner, he has a special immunity. Can't ask any questions about him. He's their best hope to defeat Donald Trump, which tells you a lot about the Democrats. But we found out something very interesting when Schiff was doing his little press conference. We found out that, for example, Adam Schiff has subpoenaed not just witnesses, and I have to come back to this witness point for you in a second, but Schiff has, in fact, subpoenaed phone records, too. Phone records of one of these associates of Giuliani, I believe it's Parnas, Lev Parnas, who have been in contact with, who was in contact with, for example, Devin Nunes of Congress and Rudy Giuliani and John Solomon, my former colleague at The Hill. So now we have Schiff pulling phone records. Now, I understand. We can do this. People are going to make all this, but he didn't go after it just was, excuse me. It's called reverse targeting. I work in the intelligence community. I know how this stuff. I also work the NYPD intelligence division where we used to pull phone records all the time. It's not hard when you know some people are in contact to be like, well, we can pretextually pull this guy's phone records and maybe we see who his psychiatrist is too. Yeah. So now, whether it's strictly legal is a different question from whether it is ethical and whether if the shoe was on the other foot, the Democrats would be accepting of this. I mean, of course, this is absurd. So we can now see, and they released without redaction that there was a member of Congress, that there was Giuliani and Nunes all in contact with this individual. And this is now being used. So, I mean, they're treating this, they're using the powers of a criminal investigation proceeding in order to go after their political vendetta here. Understand that, too. This is not a minor thing. But this is where I turn around and say, where are you, Senate Republicans? Why aren't you going to subpoena Adam Schiff's phone records? He has no special immunity here. If Schiff can subpoena the phone records that includes members of Congress, why can't, I have an idea. Subpoena Eric Sharamella's phone records. How about that? Let's see who the alleged whistleblower has been talking to and did talk to before the report came out. There's no special protection for his phone records. We don't even know if he's the whistleblower. How could they block it? Riddle me that. My friends, I'm enjoying taking a rhetorical sledgehammer to the absurdity on Capitol Hill today, and I felt like I should bring in somebody else who wields a battle axe of experience and rationality in all of these matters. Our friend Sean Davis is back in action here on the show. He is, of course, at The Federalist. He's a co-founder of The Federalist. It is one of my favorite websites. He already knows that, and he joins us now to talk about all the things. Sean, thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
I am just talking about what's going on Capitol Hill today. Try to give me your sense of what is the Democrat play here to have a bunch of constitutional law professors, 3 of the 4 who are clearly anti-Trump partisans, and 1 who just didn't vote for Trump, right, but is not a wild-eyed Trump hater, tell us that the Founding Fathers, what they really meant when they wrote the Constitution was Orange Man bad.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The one thing that, the Federalists and the anti-Federalists could agree on is that the bad orange man has to go. And, that's really what the Constitution is subordinate to, is getting rid of the orange bad man. I mean, I got to be honest, I don't know what they're doing. I didn't really understand the purpose of all the intel hearings that Schiff ran. I thought those were silly. They clearly had nothing other than leftover residual anger from how the Mueller probe blew up in their faces. And inviting up 3 completely loony left-wing law professors, one of whom said, I think a year or 2 ago, that you don't even need evidence to impeach Trump. He's just bad enough as is that he needs to go. But the only thing I can think of that they're trying to accomplish here is just boring America to death. And then, once we're all gone and there's no accountability for them, they can do whatever they want.
By the way, when I was watching this morning, I felt like there was a point at which there was at least one of the professors made an allusion to or made a reference to, and the president with this phone call kind of committed treason. I know they said bribery, but I mean, they said that he's committed effectively all these crimes. I was waiting for him to throw piracy and counterfeiting in there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everything he does is treason because he's an illegitimate president, and if you're an illegitimate president, then you have no right or authority to use the presidential powers given you in the Constitution. And I got to be honest, watching this whole thing and dealing with all this, it's like being a house guest at a dinner party where the food's awful, but you kind of just got to keep stomaching it and shoveling it down to be polite. I kind of feel like being in the political news industry. That's what we're having to do with this. We're having to pretend that this is serious and really well and put together when it's really just a complete disaster politically, legally. The Democrats, I think, are going to rue the day they started this, and at this point, I'm not even sure they end up actually impeaching him. Given
how you and my friend Raheem Kassam have both become. I mean, I've been saying 100% they impeach for weeks. I'm now between you and Raheem. I'm gonna ratchet it down to 95% certainty. But because I can see what you're saying. I mean, this. I don't know how anyone can hear. My favorite thing is when Schiff, Pelosi, Nadler, they all do this. We really wish we didn't have to impeach this president. Like, who believes this? Nobody, but even people I know who hate Trump aren't so silly that they believe that.
Well, right. My colleague Molly Hemingway actually sat behind Jerry Nadler on the Acela train shortly after the Democrats took over Congress in 2018, and he was blabbing on his phone to a close confidant about how, yeah, they were all in on impeachment. This is what was going to happen. So this idea that they're somehow just doing it in sadness, not in anger, and we didn't want to have to do this, it's total poppycock. This was the plan from the very beginning. It was actually the plan with Mueller. The problem was that, even with that sprawling, $40-50 million multi-year investigation, even they couldn't find anything on Trump. So now they're left having to pretend that some phone call with a Ukrainian leader is impeachment. If these people were capable of feeling shame, they would just be horribly embarrassed now, but clearly they're not.
Now, you're somebody that understands from actually doing it, Senate investigations, right? You worked for Senator Tom Coburn's office. I want to ask you about Schiff pulling phone records, subpoenaing phone records. I know it's for Lev Parnas, but it also has included now phone contacts with a journalist, with a member of Congress, and with the president's personal lawyer. How does that strike you, that there's now going to subpoena records? And I got some follow-ons on this, too.
Man, I think that it's really, really concerning. And look, in general, I don't have a problem with congressional subpoena power. And in fact, it's that power that they delegate to the executive that allows a lot of the law enforcement functions we have. So in principle, I don't have a problem with committees being able to do that. In practice, in this case, if indeed he did get these via subpoena, I'm not quite sure he did. But if he did, it is extremely troubling to be pulling up the phone records between the president's attorneys. Phone calls between Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani ended up on there. Pulling up phone calls from members of Congress, from their staff members. And this is coming from a guy who secretly colluded with the whistleblower who lied about his interactions with Schiff, and then Schiff later lied about those interactions, and to date is refusing to answer any questions about him. This is a huge, huge abuse of power in the midst of a process that is in of itself a massive abuse of power. I was really, really concerned when I saw that. It's bad that they did it with Nunes and his staff, but getting the phone records between the president's attorney, getting the attorneys of the person you're accusing of high crimes and misdemeanors, that is unconscionable.
Now, I want to know, where's the Senate on this, Sean? And, we have a Senate majority, Republican majority. Why don't they subpoena Schiff's records? Because I want to see if he talk. In fact, is there any legal reason why they couldn't subpoena Eric Sharamella's records?
No, none at all. Procedures are a little different in the Senate. It tends to be a more bipartisan operation there. I think often you have to have a certain vote, or you have to have the consent of the ranking member. So it's not as easy in the Senate to do it as in the House, but they can do it. And personally, I think the reason why they haven't is the two committees who would do this, Intel and Judiciary, are not run by Republicans with any sort of reputation for having a stronger work ethic or really dogged investigative skills. Burr has turned over his committee to Mark Warner entirely. He's been a complete non-entity. And Lindsey Graham, while we all enjoyed the show he put on during the Kavanaugh hearing, he seems much more content to expound in green rooms than he is to write letters and demand answers from the agencies he oversees.
Yeah, I have to say I'm disappointed so far at what we've seen from Senate Republicans in the midst of all this in general. But maybe my expectations, which were low, should have been even lower. By the way, what comes next in your mind? I mean, after they have this judiciary hearing today, what should we all be waiting for? What's supposed to be the next trick Schiff has up his sleeve?
Well, I think next we'd actually have to see some articles of impeachment. So obviously what they all are wanting to head towards is a formal vote on the House floor to impeach the president, which is to indict him of specific high crimes and misdemeanors, and then send it to a trial in the Senate where he'd either be convicted or acquitted. I think they're struggling with this because there aren't actually any specific crimes, and they're going to have to come up with more than just Orange Man bad. So that's the next step. But I really think there's a chance here we don't even get there. In fact, one of Pelosi's leadership team members told a Fox News reporter, Chad Pergram, the other night that, you know what, it's a really packed legislative schedule from here to Christmas, and we don't even know if we can fit impeachment in. So we might not even get to it until 2020. So I think the longer they kick that can down the road and drag it on, the less likely they are to finally pull the trigger on it.
Now, Sean, I want to keep you, if I can, for a moment, because I did want to touch on this story involving a convicted child porn trafficker who was bundling millions for Hillary Clinton. We're going to get to that in just a second.